The controversial anti-terrorism bill will now be up to for the president's signature.
Moving now to the anti-terror bill, it's moving much closer to becoming a law. People question the timing of the bill.
The lower house passed a controversial anti-terrorism measure. This amid fierce criticisms that the bill may be used to suppress government critics or lead to human rights violation.
The House of Representatives has approved on second reading House Bill number 6875 or the anti-terrorism bill.
Recently, something else seemed to take the spotlight of headlines from COVID-19 to now the anti-terrorism bill. It has triggered online and street protests and is undoubtedly the hottest topic today. But what really is the anti-terrorism bill?
Three years after the Marawi siege, the Philippine Congress has passed a bill granting sweeping powers to law enforcers against terrorism. But given the country's long and brutal experience with violent extremists, why the public outrage over something that's supposed to help the common good? As they say, the devil is in the details. The Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020 adds muscle to the Human Security Act of 2007, which has been described as outdated and ineffective against today's terrorists. A terrorist is now someone who engages in acts such as those intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to any person or endangers a person's life. Someone who causes extensive damage or destruction to a government or public facility, a public place, or private property. Someone who causes extensive interference with, damage, or destruction to critical infrastructure. Such acts should be intended, for instance, to create an atmosphere or spread a message of fear, provoke or influence a government by intimidation, or seriously destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, economic, or social structures of the country. To human rights groups and lawyers, the definition is so vague that it could be used to target legitimate dissent. Worse, the approved bill includes inciting to commit terrorism, raising fears that it might be misused, like how the government has resorted to charging certain people with inciting to sedition. The new bill expands the powers of the Anti-Terrorism Council, a group composed of cabinet officials. It will have the power to designate and order the arrest and detention of suspected terrorists. These suspects may be detained for a period of 14 days without warrant and may remain in jail for another 10 days. Courts can also prescribe them initially as terrorists, keeping them in prison for up to 6 months while freezing their assets. During this period, the court will conduct hearings to decide if the preliminary prescription order will be made permanent. The new bill removes a crucial safeguard contained in the old law against government abuse. A hefty fine of 500,000 pesos for each day that a suspected terrorist was kept in jail but was eventually acquitted. Of course, the bill also includes safeguards against state abuse. But given this government's track record against its critics, they fear the safeguards are mere guarantees on paper.
Anti-terrorism bill violates the liberty of Filipinos. With this bill, we have no freedom of speech and we cannot criticize the government. It is violating our human rights because we can be held for 14 days without charges being filed against us. I am against this bill because how can the government and our country improve if we are not allowed to criticize the wrongdoings of our government? This bill is very undemocratic to our country and it is a human rights disaster in the making. The provision that I disagree with is the arbitrary arrest and long prison sentences for people or representative of organizations that have displeased the president. The freedom of writers to write their opinion to the government, the freedom of Filipino citizens to criticize and point out the wrongdoings of the government will be gone. We all know that our country will develop if the president and the other government leaders will listen to the voice of the people in our country.
I am against the approval of the anti-terrorism bill. It might be a good thing for the country, but it is not extensively reviewed by the court as it was hastily approved. There's a lot to be improved in the bill, but as of now, they made the bill shackle our freedom of speech and human rights. That is why I am against the approval of the bill. The provisions that I disagree with is the detention without judicial warrant of arrest. It gives them the power to arrest any person suspected of committing any of the proscribed acts. They can arrest leaders of organizations with different opinion against the country. It suppressed the voice of the people and made the government more imposing with power on their side.
Although the government said that this bill is to protect the Filipinos from the terrorists, I am against this bill. From the bill, there is a potential abuse of power and human rights violation if given at the wrong hands. I also think that this bill is made not to protect the Filipinos, but to protect the governments from the criticisms that they are having now due to the pandemic. I read the bill. The problem with it is that all they have to do is allege that you have intent to harm for stating your opinion and you would be branded as a terrorist. While Section 4 clearly states that being in opposition, in protest, or speaking out does not fall under the anti-terror bill, an allegation from the arresting officer negates that. So from Section 4, if an arresting officer says that you are a terrorist, then you will be branded as a terrorist even without evidence, and they will arrest you without warrant of arrest. So I am against Section 4.
Many of the people fear the bill. I am just one of those people that do. I mean, who wouldn't fear a bill that seems to undermine the people's democratic rights, starting off with its definition of who are the terrorists? I myself am uncertain about how the government determines the suspected terrorists. Those who voice their opinions on social media may even be charged of inciting to terrorism without any basis, as warrantless arrests can happen under this new bill. This is clearly an abuse of power, and I am against such act. Under the Section 4 of the Act, it lists down those who will be recognized as terrorists, and dissent is supposed to be an exception to that, provided that it doesn't cause a serious risk to public safety. However, it seems that the government is given control to choose who has committed legitimate acts of dissent, as there are reports of ransom social media being used as reason by the government to charge people with inciting to sedition. Under the Section 17 of the Act, the bill allows the court to declare people as terrorists even without accomplishing full hearing. In another section, Section 27, a person can be branded as a terrorist by the government without being given the chance to defend oneself. If that isn't an act of exercising dictatorship, I don't know what is. Hopefully this bill doesn't get implemented, although it is alarming as to how fast the bill reached Malacanang and is only awaiting the president's signature.
The anti-terrorism bill or any other bills to be passed as laws are always meant to be for the good of the people, or at least that's how it's supposed to be. And yet the anti-terrorism bill, although on the outside present itself with good intentions, has provisions that makes me personally question these intentions. I stand against the anti-terrorism bill. But this doesn't mean, however, that I am pro-terrorism. For one, I think it's such an insult to the Filipino people on how the bill is being presented positively, and yet in details are such vagueness that potentially attacks our rights as Filipinos. In this bill, many provisions contradict the Constitution. One of these is the formation of the Anti-Terrorism Council. Article 3, Section 1 of the Philippine Constitution states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall any person be denied of equal protection of the laws. However, in the making of the Anti-Terrorism Council, It states that it has the power to authorize warrantless arrests and detention of suspected terrorists. In addition to this, the very definition of terrorist based on the bill is already vague and could be misleading. One among the definitions are that terrorist is defined as someone who creates an atmosphere or spread a message of fear to provoke or influence by intimidation of the government. This means if we will base solely on the definition, that no one can challenge the governance of the country. This clearly challenges our democracy. The voice of the Filipino people is powerful. In fact, the biggest people revolution in the history of our country led to our freedom from dictatorship and helped attain democracy that we are practicing right now. If our voice paved the way to freedom, wouldn't it be that our silence will also remove this very freedom?
I'm Joy Kathleen Valenzuela, and I stand against the anti-terrorism bill.
Ako si Giancarlo Odiente, and I stand against the anti-terrorism bill.
Ako si Krisha Camry, and I stand against anti-terrorism bill.
Ako si Ann Cristel Bagamaspad and I stand against anti-terrorism bill.
Ako si Child Marie S. Santiago, and I stand against the anti-terrorism bill.